Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. He is the co-author of 3 best-selling books on value, value-based pricing, The Challenge of Value, and most recently, The 7 Challenges of Value. He keeps a little quieter about the fact that almost 30 years ago, he wrote The Bluffer's Guide to Public Speaking. He has also just launched the Value Challenge System, a program designed to transform the way people sell, moving them from a product to a customer focus, from discounting to winning by understanding, creating, and delivering outstanding customer value and getting paid for it. His passion is value, how to understand it, how to communicate it, and how to price on it. Today, he's going to look at some of the 7 big mistakes businesses make when selling on value and how to avoid them. The discount default alone could be having a serious impact on your margins and your profitability. As a result, the next 30 to 40 minutes could make you that much richer. He's the director of Axia Value Solutions. So with that, please welcome Mike Wilkinson.
Taylor, thank you very much indeed for that very kind introduction. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us. I'd like to particularly thank those of you who downloaded the 7 Big Mistakes report, and even more those who've been kind enough to complete the short survey. I did promise it would be short, so I hope that you're happy I kept my promise. And just for information, the average completion time was 3 minutes and 31 seconds, so it was pretty short. Now, clearly, the reason for asking you to do that was so that I could just be sure I was going to cover the issues that seem to be particularly important right now. Now, some of you have even been kind enough to drop me a note already saying things like, yes, number 3 absolutely applies to us. And some have even been in contact to discuss how to eliminate some of the big issues. So thanks to everybody who's been in touch so far. Anyway, before we get fully underway, I just wanted to check who had actually read the report. I was going to assume that everybody had, but that's probably a bit of a mistake. So if you have read it, could you put a yes in the chat box? And if you haven't read it, can you put a no? And Taylor will tell me quickly how many people have read it, Taylor.
Yeah, let me launch this poll, actually. I've got.
Okay.
There you go, makes it a little easier for everyone. So you guys can indicate your answer right on the screen. We've got about 71% of the audience has voted. Give them a couple more seconds to put in their answers. All right, we've got about 95% voted.
And 5% don't know.
I have no idea what you're talking about. All right, I'm going to close this poll. And here are the results. So Mike, 46% of the audience indicated yes, they have read the report. 54% have still not.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. And just by the way, if any of you don't actually have a copy of the report right now, but would like a copy, Taylor will make sure that everybody gets a link to it at the end of the webinar. Because really it is the report that I'm going to be focusing on, or some of the key elements. And certainly for those of you who have read it, I'm sure that as you were going through the report, some of you were probably thinking, good grief, we don't do that. Equally, some of you were no doubt thinking, uh-oh, that's exactly what we're doing. And indeed, a couple of the people who've been in touch with me already have done so because they really did recognize within the report some of the things, some of the mistakes that they were making in their business. But either way, whilst all 7 may not apply in every case, these are the big mistakes that I come across repeatedly. Unfortunately, they can all be addressed. And I'll suggest how in a bit more detail perhaps at the end. And as a bonus, as Taylor has already indicated, I will be sharing with you a copy of Module 3. And again, I'll talk to you a bit more about that right at the end of the session. Now, clearly, unfortunately, in the next 35 to 40 minutes or so, I'm not going to be able to cover all of the 7 big mistakes in detail. So if you haven't read it or if you haven't got a copy, please make sure you take advantage of that. What I am going to do first is to take a quick look at the survey results. And then just focus on 2 or 3 of the key mistakes that people are making. Not that they're not all key, of course. And again, if you haven't done the survey and would like to, just let me know and I'll let you have a link to that as well, because certainly from my point of view, the more the merrier. Anyway, first of all, as I said, to the survey and the discounting question. I think in hindsight, I should have probably left the word majority out of this or changed it to a lot, because I think it might have swayed some people's scoring. But nevertheless, 58% or 57% clearly discount on a regular basis in order to win business. And I have to say, in the conversations that I have with sales VPs and sales directors, CEOs and salespeople, there is no doubt in my mind that one of the big problems facing many businesses today is both the tendency to discount almost on demand, but also the difficulty that they sometimes have in overcoming this tendency. The next question was about understanding value, what it is and what it means. Now, I'm not too sure even myself what in broad terms means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pessimistic view based on years of experience that what in broad terms means really is that I don't really understand value. And I hope you don't think that's too harsh. But on that basis, 73% are not sure or actually really don't know. And I have to say that I've done similar surveys with other groups, and that is around what I would expect. The problem is, if we don't know or we aren't sure what value is, that makes selling on value and defending our prices on the basis of our value that bit more difficult. Well, actually a lot more difficult. And it makes pricing on value every bit as difficult. Next was about selling on value being down to the sales team. And I have to say, truly, I am delighted that so many have chosen to disagree with that statement. Selling on value is an organizational issue. Everyone in the organization needs to understand their role in understanding, creating, and delivering outstanding customer value. That means that everyone in the organization needs to understand value in the same way. It means that there needs to be a common language of value across the business that everyone understands and is committed to. It's one thing understanding your value, it's quite another communicating it. Even assuming that we understand value, 57% believe they are not good at communicating it. And in fact, if you add in the not sures, that comes up to 66%. Now that number is backed up by an even more extraordinary figure. And in this, we lose out to competitors even when we know we have the best solution. 84% of the respondents to the survey said that's the case. They agree, they do lose out. Now, if that is true, then we are clearly failing dramatically to communicate our value effectively. If we have the best solution and we cannot convince our customers that that is the case, then something is going wrong somewhere. And what on earth is that costing you in lost sales? What is it costing your customers in suboptimal results? Because clearly, if your solution is the best, they're buying solutions which are not as good and presumably getting results which are not as good as they could have been. Just imagine one of your average customers and the average sales value. Now, clearly, I don't know what the lifetime value is of many of your customers, and I'm guessing you could probably write the number down. But let's assume it's $50,000 and you're losing just one deal a month at $50,000 of lifetime value. That's $650,000 a year. Now, I have to say, I do know businesses that are losing a lot more than a single deal a month simply by failing to understand and communicate value. That 84% alone suggests that there really is a problem that needs to be resolved. Finally, we looked at our prices, and our prices reflect the value we deliver and we get them. Now, I'm not sure whether we're in the land of the wildly optimistic, but 43% either say yes, they always do, or they usually do. Now, I'm sure you'll agree that when you just look at those, there are some interesting numbers there. And at the heart of all of it is value, understanding it, defending it, basing our prices on it, convincing our customers that we deliver more of it than competitors, and getting paid on the basis of it. The heart of value pricing and value selling is understanding value, solving the value mystery. The survey also gave the opportunity to add other things that were considered important, and here are some of them. I apologize if your comments aren't on the list. I'm sure if you've actually completed the survey and you put yours in, I'm sure you're looking for it. They're not all there, but simply because I ran out of space, and I'm not going to read through them all either. You'll be able to look at them, assuming you download the slide set. But you'll see that I have highlighted some of the key points, some of the things that sort of stand out. Things like the ability to put together compelling value propositions, understanding total cost of ownership properly and effectively, changing the seller mindset from a transactional to a consultative to a value-driven approach, knowing what you're worth, integrating value-based pricing into your corporate business culture. I'll move on. Sorry, I'll just move on. Yeah, commodity product. Thinking that well, here's one, bad incentive systems. This came up on a number of occasions in the survey results, and it isn't something I'll just mention a little bit more in a few moments' time. A focus on product. Again, it is one of the big mistakes. It's included in the 7 mistakes, but a number of people actually highlighted that there is a tendency for the sales team to really focus on product, a failure to monetize value, difficulty selling soft values. So if you don't have a product to sell, if you have a service to sell, is that more difficult to sell? And confidence in the price. Now, clearly there are a lot of issues that people are struggling to address on top of the 7 big mistakes that were outlined in the report. When I put the report together originally, I didn't actually put the 7 mistakes in any particular priority order. I think there are issues that all need to be addressed. And certainly these are the things that I find coming up consistently in most of the businesses with which I get involved. Now, they don't necessarily all come up all together, but because they are linked so closely one with another, they do seem to come up fairly regularly as a sort of batch, if you like. So first of all, let's take a look at the 7 big mistakes, and the number one, which was the dreaded discount default. This is probably the one thing that costs business the most. In our survey, 43% suggested that they either never or rarely discounted to win the majority of their business, but 57% said that they did. And I have to tell you that my experience is that discounting to win is very much alive and well. I think probably one of the questions I get asked more often than any other is, how can I stop my sales team, or indeed, how can I stop myself from simply discounting to win business? It is one of the most pervasive sales habits, and you and I both know that it's a sure route to reduce margins, reduce profits, commoditization, and setting the kind of precedent that we just don't want to be known for. I think I can honestly say that I have never had a client that didn't face this issue to some degree or another. And think about this for a second. What cost takes up the biggest share of almost every business and doesn't appear in the annual statement? The answer: the cost of discounts. Your annual report shows sales net of any discounts and promotions. That means that the cost of these is often just not measured and is forgotten. So if you discount your price by, say, 5%, how much more business do you actually need to book to make up for that? Where's it going to come from? And the risk is that to get the increased revenue you need to make up for the impact of the original discount, you discount again, and so on. And that's, of course, assuming that we do anything at all. So it suddenly occurred to me, why do salespeople tend to discount in order to win business? And I think potentially there are a number of possible reasons. First of all, is it a lack of confidence? All too often, sellers find it difficult or feel uncomfortable talking about price. And this lack of confidence communicates itself to customers who immediately see the opportunity for a discount. Is it a lack of pricing discipline within the business, which allows people to effectively set their own prices, a sort of free-for-all pricing approach, or an approach where pricing disciplines are simply not enforced? I said I'd mention this again because it came up a number of times in the survey, but inappropriate reward mechanisms. I'm a great believer in the maxim, the things that get rewarded are the things that get done. Now, unfortunately, that means that if you're rewarding the wrong things, you'll get more of exactly the behavior that you don't want. Fear of what might happen if you don't discount. If we don't discount, we'll lose the business, which kind of goes back to a lack of confidence, which links directly to we don't know how to defend our prices. This for me is a big one. And the question is, are our salespeople sufficiently well prepared with the skills, the tools, and the information to allow them to defend our prices on the basis of the great value that we deliver? Do they understand value? Are they confident talking about value? Do they understand their customers' perceptions of value? Is it perhaps a belief that customers only care about price? Believe me, if I had $1 for every time I've heard salespeople tell me that their customers are only interested in price, I would be a reasonably rich man. Or finally, is it a belief that our product is a commodity and price is the only differentiator that we have? So I thought it might be handy to ask you exactly those questions. So Taylor, I think we've got a poll for everybody, at least selecting 5 of those options, yeah?
Yep. Yeah, and I just launched that. So you guys can indicate on your screen the top 3 reasons why you think your sales team is discounting to win. And I'll let you know as the votes come in, Mike.
Yeah, that'd be great. No, just put it. Yeah, the top 3 would be fine. I'm fascinated to discover.
Looks like we've got about 35% voted. We're up to 60%. All right, 75% have voted. You can just indicate the answer right on your screen.
Are we there yet?
Almost. Looks like we've got about 85% voted. I'll give 2 more seconds and then I'm going to close this down. All right. All right, so here are the results. All right, Mike, I know you can't see this on your screen, but we're looking at 69% lack of confidence.
Wow.
49% lack of pricing discipline. 27% inappropriate reward mechanisms. 80% don't know how to defend price. And 49% customers only care about price.
Wow, how interesting. And I think when you and I were talking earlier on, Taylor, we suspected that don't know how to defend price might be well up there. And it is a huge, huge issue. And certainly there are ways in which we can begin to address that, and clearly given that 84% are losing business because competitors are winning even though we've got the best solution, clearly there is an issue around there that we need to address. So thank you very much indeed for that. That is really interesting. And yeah, that's it. But if you think about it, there are, I guess, two main options open to a seller when the buyer says they're too expensive. And the first option is to offer the discount. Yeah, so it's a discount. And there are various ways that might be done. For example, just dropping the price by a certain percentage is the obvious one, obviously. And sadly, I don't know whether it applies to you, but in my experience, it was always by an easy to calculate percentage, like sort of 5 or 10%, rather than 1.25 or 0.75 or something similar. But it isn't just money off. It might be free training, free stock, or any one of a number of creative ways that sellers have for offering discounts without actually calling them discounts. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with some of those. Option 2, of course, is to explain why, given the value that your solution delivers to the customer, you believe the price to be, if anything, a little low. Now, of those two options, clearly one is quite easy but rather costly, and the other is rather more difficult but a good deal more cost effective. Now, those are the two main options, but obviously there's a third option, which is a combination of 1 and 2, because to be honest, it would be a little naive to think that just because you've communicated your value more effectively, you'll never have to discount ever again. It's a lovely thought, but actually quite often it will be a combination of the two things. And the fourth option, of course, is to walk away, because not every customer is your kind of customer. And sometimes you do need to make the decision that this is a customer you simply don't want to be doing business with. Unfortunately, of course, the temptation is to go for the easy option, especially if the reward mechanism rewards revenue. And let me ask you, when you've lost a piece of business, how often have you heard your sales team or yourself say, if only we dropped the price a little more, we would have won that? I'm betting that it's a good deal more often you've heard anyone saying, if only I'd explained our value more effectively, we could have won that business. In the first situation, the drop your price option, the assumption is that the only thing stopping the customer buying from you is your price. But how do you know? Customers simply do not always buy the cheapest things they can find, thank goodness. If they did, we'd all be driving the cheapest cars, wearing the cheapest watches, eating the cheapest food, staying at the cheapest hotels, but we're not. And that should tell us instantly that price is not the only thing that's important. Most customers are value sensitive rather than price sensitive. Now, I think generally there are 3 key reasons why customers don't buy. Number 1, there isn't enough value for them in your offer. In this case, you just need to review your offer and understand why you aren't delivering the value the customer is looking for. Excuse me. Secondly, they just can't see the value in your offer. In other words, it might be there, you've just failed to communicate it effectively. And the third reason is they can't afford you, in which case you might wonder whether you're targeting the right customers. Now, very often, all 3 of those translate into you're too expensive, or words to that effect in customer language. But if just going for the lowest price every time isn't what every customer does, even though it might sometimes feel that way if you happen to be a salesperson, how do we find out what is? Well, let's go back to the point that customers tend to be value sensitive rather than just price sensitive. To both understand this and be able to defend our price, or perhaps repackage our offer more effectively, we need to understand value. how do our customers determine whether the price we are asking represents good value to them or not? And how do we make sure that we're demonstrating to the customer the things that they do value, rather than adopting a sort of scattergun approach in the hope that something might just resonate with them eventually? If you're going to sell on value, you need to understand value. And in our survey, only 27% said they completely understand value. And the reality is that lots of individuals and lots of businesses have confused views of what value really is. If you don't believe me, just ask a selection of people in your own business, and I guarantee you'll get a variety of different interpretations as to what value is, both generically and what value they think it is that you deliver to your customers right now. On a recent survey, a recent series of webinars I did for a large client, I ran another poll asking people what is value. When we talk about value, do we know what it is we are actually talking about? And of the more than 300 people involved in this particular webinar, 27% said, yeah, they think they really understand what value is, which is exactly the same as our result. 67% think they've got a rough idea, and I have to say 7% were honest enough to admit they hadn't got the remotest idea of what value was. So on that basis, even assuming the 27% do really understand value, it does mean that over 70% were unclear at best. Now, how can we sell value if we're actually unclear as to what value is? How can we price on the basis of value if we don't understand it? When it comes to value, there are two things we need to know. First of all, we need to know what exactly is value as a concept and what are its constituent parts. And secondly, and really importantly, what does value look like from our customer's perspective? Because the single most important thing to understand about value is that value is defined by your customers, not by you. So we really need to understand not just value, but customer value. So how do we find out? How do we discover what our customers consider to be value? And how do we then demonstrate that we can provide more of the value that they're looking for than competing alternatives? And then how do we go about delivering our value promise? And I think the starting point really is to have a definition and a structure around just what value is. If you've heard me before, you'll know that I do have a definition of value developed during a conference I was speaking at in Copenhagen all the way back in 2006. A definition that was the result of the combined intellectual input of a group of around 120 senior managers. And their definition was value is a mystery, and our job is to solve the value mystery. And this leads us on to mistake number 4, failing to solve the value mystery. Failing to understand the things that are really important from the customer's perspective, and a failure to understand the customer in detail leads to all sorts of other issues. Too often, we look at value from our perspective rather than that of the customer. But the truth is, as we have seen, our customers define value, not us. So we better understand exactly how they do that. Now, we realized even back then that just knowing we had to solve the value mystery wasn't actually too much help. We needed some sort of template, some value template, an understanding of the component elements of value. And for that, we created a tool which we called the value triad. Now, the value triad, as the name implies, has 3 component elements: revenue gain, cost reduction, and emotional contribution. The first is revenue gain. And the question you need to ask yourself in your business is just think about, how does what we do help our customers to improve their revenue? How does what we do help our customers to improve their revenue? The second component was, or is, cost reduction. And the question here is, how does our product and service help our customers to reduce their costs? So what is it? How do we do it? How do our customers reduce costs as a result of doing business with us? Now, for most businesses, these are absolutely critical drivers. And the question you really need to think about is, how can we help our customers to do one or both of those things increasingly effectively? And just as an aside, if you're going to show your customers how you can help them to make money or how you can help them to reduce their costs, you must understand how they generate revenue and incur cost in the first place. I mean, how can you show me how you can improve my revenues if you have absolutely no idea where they come from right now? And what that means is that there is a need for a much, much deeper customer understanding than seems to be the case generally right now. So how do they generate value for their customers? What is their value proposition for their customers? Because understanding those things helps you hugely when you're coming to position your solution and the value that your solution can deliver. Now, both revenue gain and cost reduction are tangible and objective. You can measure them. I'm not going to suggest that that measurement is necessarily easy, but it is possible to put monetary value around the revenue gain and cost reductions that you can potentially deliver, and you need to. And the leverage point tool is one great way of doing that. And it moves you away from everybody else who says we can help you save money to someone who can say, we can help you save $36,000 in year one, then $18,000 in subsequent years, and this is how we're going to do it. Because your customers want not just platitudes and wishful thinking, they want to know how much and by when. The third element we called emotional contribution, and that's around trust. It's around the quality of the relationship that you have with your customers. It's about your ability to make it easy for them to do business with you. It's about what your brand says to you, says to them rather. It's about reducing perceived risk and many others. And this is much, much less objective and tangible, but it is no less important. Indeed, sometimes the emotional connection can be the one thing that makes the final difference. Another issue with value is that it's generally based on someone's perception. And each of us sees value in slightly different ways. So it's important that we gain as close an understanding of what value looks like for each of our customers. And as they say, perception is reality. And take a look at this definition of value-based pricing from the FT lexicon. Value-based prices are prices based on the value of a product as perceived from the customer's perspective. The perceived value determines the customer's willingness to pay, and thus the maximum price a company can charge for its products. Wow, the value of a product as perceived from the customer's perspective. That should really, really focus the mind on making sure we understand what value means. Value is defined by the customer, not by us. So how does the customer, how do your customers define value, and how do you find out? Because as the definition goes on to say, the maximum price you can charge is determined by the customer's willingness to pay. And the customer's willingness to pay is driven by the customer's perception of the value that they will receive in return for whatever it is they choose to pay. So a key part of our job in solving the value mystery is in moving from what I call a generic view of value to a specific view of value. So a generic view is the value that you can anticipate as being common to all the businesses in a given business segment. So if you're in product management or product marketing, maybe you put together your perception of what you believe the value is that you deliver to customers in a given business segment. The task of the sales team then is to test out those assumptions in conversation with the customer, because the generic value, if you like, is our best guess. We need to check just how accurate our best guesses are and move to a much more specific view. And the specific value is the things that are unique to individual companies within a given business sector. And there is only one way that you can find out the answer to that. There is only one way in which you can really move from having a generic understanding of the things that are likely to be important to customers in a particular business segment into a real understanding of what is specifically important to individual customers within that segment, and that is by asking the question. And that moves us on to mistake number 3. And I call this product first rather than customer first. And I have to say, of all the traps that sellers fall into, this is a biggie, because sellers love to talk about their products. Often they just love to talk. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with being excited and passionate about what you do and the great things that you can do for your customers, but at the right time. The problem is if you just launch into a product pitch, no matter how great the product, all too often the customer will just turn off. Because we're not learning the things that are at the heart of the customer's issues, the challenges they face, what they're trying to achieve, their strategy. We're failing to move from the generic to the specific. And every customer likes to think that they are unique. In looking at mistake number 1, the discount default, which is where we started, we've also touched on mistakes number 3, failing to solve the mystery, and mistake number 4, putting the product first. And as I said earlier, all of these things are linked together. All of the 7 mistakes are linked together. But for me, the focus really is on discount defaulting, and it is alive and well. And to begin to address it, we must to be able to do a number of things. First of all, we have to be able to focus on value, not price. Remember, your customers are value sensitive generally, not just price sensitive. We need to understand customer value drivers, the things that are really, really important to them. In other words, you have to solve the value mystery. Be confident and proud of your price. Don't apologize for your prices. If you understand customer value and you can deliver that value, you've got nothing to apologize for. And finally, use case studies to back up your ability to deliver. Without these, we're just back to presenting the value we think our customers want without taking the trouble to really find out. Now, that's about it. But at the beginning, I was going to promise you a bonus if you made it to the end. And I think everybody's made it to the end. So many congratulations to you all. But Taylor sort of stole my thunder because I really wanted to give you a chance to watch one of the modules from the Value Challenge system for free. And the Value Challenge system is a 14-module online program that will help you and your teams to eliminate those 7 big mistakes, reduce the 84% of you who are losing out to competitors despite having the best solution, and really understand, create, and deliver outstanding customer value and get paid for it. Now, the module I chose, module 3, is, I think, the most important module to share with you. It's called What is this thing called value? And it is me talking directly to you in a 21-minute, 42-second video. So the real horror of that is not only will you be able to hear me, but you'll be able to see me as well. And if you want a free copy, then please just say yes on the survey that Taylor will let you have at the end of the presentation. And I'll get back to you and get it out to you as soon as I can. I promise you, I do promise you, it could completely change the way you look at your business and the way you deliver value to your customers. So finally, I would just like to say it has, as always, been a pleasure speaking with you. It's been a pleasure sharing some of my ideas with you, and it will be a pleasure to share more of them with you in the future. I'm Mike Wilkinson, and thank you very much indeed for listening.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing all those insights. And just to move on here, we've got a few questions that have come through during the webinar, but there's still time to enter the question into the panel on your screen. So if you have any questions for Mike, just put those in right now. And while you're entering, a reminder to complete that 10-second survey that Mike just mentioned while exiting today's webinar to receive access to Module 3 of the Value Challenge system. And now to give you a couple more minutes to answer your questions, a few words on leverage points. So Forrester research states that the first vendor to succeed in communicating a vision of value to executives wins the business 74% of the time. So how can you guarantee that you'll be that vendor? Well, in today's poll, 80% of you indicated that your sales team is discounting because they don't know how to defend your price. So at least 80% of you are not the first vendor to succeed in communicating a vision to value. So how can we change that? Your sales team really needs to bring their approach and their value communication approach into the 21st century, meaning it must be value-focused, customer-centric, and digital. The traditional sales approach was created to educate a buyer, but today's buyers are more educated than ever, spending more than 60% of their buying process researching online before even talking to a sales rep. Do away with the standard corporate overview, long PowerPoint presentation, extensive questioning, and features and benefits review. Instead, create a crisp, digital presentation that highlights what you're actually going to deliver to that customer, qualitatively, quantitatively, and financially. Present data that can be revised so the prospect can visualize financial results and leave behind a unique presentation that is tailored to them. Sounds great, right? But where should you start? Well, that answer is case studies. Old school sales and marketing reps have generated a plethora of amazing content that your buyers want to read, but it's static and frequently gets lost in the shuffle. Case studies are a prime example. They very clearly give you a crisp background and challenge, spice it up with a quote, and then get straight into solutions and financial results. Buyers download them from your site. They ask for them after a sales call, and they make buying decisions based off the financial results displayed. So why are your salespeople using them as a leave behind? And once again, let's pause right there. Leave behind. Why are we leaving behind something that gets to the point fast and proves your value and convinces a buyer to buy? Maybe it's because they aren't digital, but now they can be. Embedding this information into your sales presentation is the only way to be the first vendor to communicate a vision to value. And remember, according to Forrester, that vendor wins the business 74% of the time. So I took some screenshots from our interactive sales presentation tool to give you a very quick example. This is a digital presentation. Everything you see here can be customized live for the prospect. This is a fictional example where we embedded an existing static case study into the presentation. To start, we frame the customer's challenge. After providing industry insights, we jump into the solutions that were provided to a similar customer within that case study. Business productivity improvements, risk mitigation, IT infrastructure cost savings, and IT staff productivity benefits. We then get straight to financial results, quantifying the value that was delivered from each solution. Again, all of this is customizable. Although information came from a case study for a similar customer to the prospect on the line, you may find that the prospect wants to change a few numbers to better match their company. With a digital presentation, all of that's doable, then and there. Recalculating the total value delivered and creating a presentation that's completely unique to the prospect on the line. So if you found any of that interesting, we'd love to have you enter into our monthly raffle that we're doing, where we will digitally transform one of your case studies free of charge. Just check the corresponding box in the exit survey upon leaving today's webinar, or email us at casestudies@leveragepoint.com. Okay, that's it for my spiel. And looks like we've got some good questions. Always the most popular that I'll answer myself is yes, this webinar is recorded, and the slides and recording will be emailed to you within 2 business days. All right, Mike, let's get started. Okay, so first question for you, Mike. Our company is not doing anything on value right now. So where should we start in this whole process?
Wow. They're not doing anything. It's interesting. Again, one of the 7 big mistakes is that organizations think that it's all about the sales force. And very often that does seem to be the case. Frequently I get asked to go in and, well, let's train the sales force on value and everything will be okay. But I hope the point that I made during the presentation is that value is an organizational issue. Understanding, creating and delivering outstanding customer value is an organizational issue. And given that that is the case, I do think the starting point is to try to get senior level buy-in right at the beginning. Really is absolutely essential. If this is going to work, then everybody in the organization needs to buy into it, and certainly the senior management team have to. So I think that's where you start.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Great. So we talked a lot about communicating value, but to what extent is the failure to communicate value an issue in clients that you've been working with in the past?
Yeah, it does reflect quite a lot, the comments that came back in the survey. There is a real problem in communicating value, and I think partly it stems from the fact that all too frequently there is a failure to solve the value mystery, if you like. There's a failure to really understand the things that are important to customers. Again, all of these mistakes do tend to wrap into one with the other. That the product first approach is really not about a value approach to the sale at all. It's about talking about what we can do rather than understanding the challenges, the issues, the objectives, the long-term strategy of customers, and actually putting together solutions that resonate really effectively with them. So our business is failing to communicate value. Absolutely they are. Is there a solution to that? Yeah, very much there is. I mean, the value challenge system, for example, it really takes you through understanding value at the beginning all the way through to how do we put together a really powerful and persuasive value proposition at the end. So there are ways in which the problem can be overcome, but none of these things is a quick fix. None of these things is a magic bullet. They all require real work and effort to actually put them right in an organizational sense.
Great, thanks. Here's another one for you. How does the value that you bring versus the competitor factor in to community?
Well, I think you have to think about, put yourself in the customer's shoes. The customer, if he is faced with 2 or 3 or more alternatives, will obviously therefore be making a comparison one with the other. One instant issue is to make sure that your potential customers are comparing like with like, because for those of you who are salespeople, you will know instantaneously that customers will convince you that they always do that, when in reality you know full well that they do not. So the starting point is to make sure that they're doing that. And I think then it all goes back to the fact, I think one potential differentiator for a really effective sales approach is that it is perfectly possible for you as a salesperson to know more about the customer and more about the customer's issues and challenges and all those other things than your competitors can do. And more importantly than that, your customer knows that you know. And because the customer knows that you truly understand him and his business and the things that he's trying to do, the chances are he's going to be more receptive and more understanding of your solution, and we'll see how your solution more closely meets their needs than other potential solutions can do, simply because other salespeople will not have done the job to the same degree. And I really do see that in real life frequently. I mean, I've seen examples where perhaps you haven't got singularly the most elegant solution, but your solution wins because you understand the customer and you can position your solution that much more effectively with them, so that your value proposition becomes much more persuasive. Does that answer that, Taylor?
Yeah, I think that does a great job answering that, actually. Great. So here's another one for you. What are some metrics to assess revenue gains and cost reduction?
Well, actually, the metrics that you would use to measure that would be driven by your understanding of where your customer generates revenue and where they incur cost. And I find this happens quite regularly, that the depth of understanding of that is not as deep as it should be. So in other words, we just don't understand fully where customer revenue comes from. But if you're going to demonstrate to a customer that you can help them to improve their revenue, then you do need to understand where it is they generate it. And if you know that, then arriving at the KPIs that you need to measure whether you're having an impact on that area or not becomes that much easier. Otherwise, you're sort of fishing in thin air. You don't quite know what to measure. And the same applies to cost reduction. Cost reduction sometimes is easier, but again, I find that people don't think broadly enough. They will look at a cost. They'll look at, for example, a machine breakdown. Let's assume that you're dealing with a customer. They have a machine breakdown, and you think, right, well, that's obviously going to cost a lot of money. And the question then is, but how often does the machine break down? What's the impact on the rest of the business if it breaks down? What did the people who work on the machine do whilst it's broken down? How much production is lost as a result of that? All of these things are measurable and have a monetary value. And then asking the customer, what are the most important things for you? What's the key drivers for you that you would measure to attain, to arrive at the fact that you've improved your cost base? They will tell you. As long as you demonstrate an understanding yourself of the impact of these things on their business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so how do you sell to a contractor in a plan and spec situation? How do you sell value in that situation?
Oh, wow, that's an interesting one. With difficulty. It's the easy answer. I'm assuming in plan and spec you're talking about, I'm dealing with HVAC clients, heating, ventilation, air conditioning people who so you'll have the architect will specify various things. It will go to the major contractor. The major contractor will then go out to the suppliers, and very often the feeling is that the only thing they want is the cheapest possible price. And again, I've often had it said to me that they don't really care about the people who are actually going to move into the building at the end of the day. They just care about enhancing their profits. So it becomes difficult. And I think the area we've come into is we need to talk to as many people in the value chain as we can and influence them. So if we don't talk to an architect in a situation like that, it's going to be more difficult to get them to influence the main contractor to buy what they want. If we don't talk to the potential end users or the letting agents or whatever it is, we can't get them to influence what we want to do. And I think it is hard, it is difficult, but I think the more broadly we talk to people who have an impact and an influence over the final end product, the better. And it's not all about price. Again, look for case studies, look for examples of where things have gone desperately wrong. We've got a fantastic example over here in the UK at the moment with KFC, who have changed their distributor. Can you believe that Kentucky Fried Chicken in the UK has run out of chicken? Because we've got 600 branches closed at the moment because they changed distributor, and the distributor turned out to be a complete disaster. They moved from a specialist food distribution company that they've been working with for years, who are doing a great job, to somebody else who gave them a lower price, and they are paying a huge price for doing that. And again, I think it's about reminding people of the cost of doing things sometimes on the cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty crazy. I actually just saw something on that yesterday for the first time.
Oh, it's great. It's great news over here.
Okay, so it looks like we probably have time for one last question. And this one's really about tying value-based selling into, your existing sales methodology. So how can value-based selling tie into, say you're using the Challenger Sale by CEB or Miller-Hyman strategic selling? How can you tie value-based selling into that existing methodology?
Well, I think they fit in very neatly, really. And I get the same question, around CRM. How do I tie in a value system into CRM? I have a fundamental belief that sometimes we overcomplicate things. When I look at value selling, I think there are four basic things that we need to do. And the four things are, first of all, we need to make sure that we qualify, that we make sure we're working with the sorts of customers that we want to win and have the kind of business that is valuable to us. So qualifying your opportunities really is hugely important, and getting the right people to work with. That then allows you to move quality opportunities into your pipeline and get into the most important part of the whole process, which is step 2, which is value discovery. And value discovery is all about customer. Value discovery is not about talking about how wonderful all your products are. Value discovery is talking to the customer about the challenges they have, the issues, the objectives, all of those kinds of things. It's about making sure that you understand who all the key people are. It's about networking, making sure you understand everybody. And at the end of the process, if you can turn to your customer and say, Mr. Customer, if I understand you correctly, these are the things that you are trying to address, and the customer effectively says back to you, that's it, you've got it, then you move to the third stage, which is value demonstration, which is how you demonstrate the extent to which you can deliver for your customer the things that the customer wants done. That then leaves only the final step, because once the customer has said yes to that, you move into step 4, which is value delivery. So for me, value selling, you need to simplify things. Don't overcomplicate everything. Qualify your opportunities. Make sure you're working with the kinds of customers that you want to work with, who can help you to enhance your margins, your profitability, and your revenues. Number 2, value discovery. Make sure that you understand the things that are important to your customer. Number 3, demonstrate your value. And number 4, deliver it. Now, if you look at the challenge sale, if you look at Miller Heiman, they in broad terms, they have those component elements within them. So I think they fit perfectly well. But if anybody wants to discuss it with me any further, I'm very welcome.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Mike. And just to tack on a little bit, we actually hosted a webinar in November. Our CEO, Peyton Marshall, discussed how you can really integrate various sales methodologies into your value-based selling and your sales tools. So that's available on demand on our resource center on our website, if you'd like to check that out.
Brilliant. As well. Yeah, I've seen that one, yeah. Yeah, definitely a good one. Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for today. Just before you guys go, just a reminder to register for next month's webinar. We'll have Stefan Liozu, Chief Value Officer of Talis Group, joining us, and he will be discussing exploring the value of your digital and data offers. But that is it from us for today, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us, and a really special thank you to Mike for your insights. We really appreciate it, and it's always great to have you here. So thanks for joining us. Thank you very much indeed, Taylor. Thank you all for sparing the time as well. It's been great being with you.
Great, and I'll see you guys all later. Take care.